Thank you. Well, I'm Father Breza, and we're in the Polish Museum on 2nd and Liberty, 2nd and soon-to-be Bytów Byway.
Yeah, for the anniversary.
Yeah, we're going to rename the street. Had this idea already 5 years ago. All the streets from here to 9th Street are just numbers.
Yeah.
2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. Okay. Can't we just add something to it instead of changing the name? And we would do Kosciuszko on front and Pulaski on 3rd and go, or Derdowski, whatever we'd have. Anyway, I called city engineer. He told me to call somebody else. I told the city planner. He told me to call somebody else. I called everybody, and we got no place. So, but this year somebody picked up on it when we were talking about the East End, and the city council voted on it, and we're going to get, in time for the festival, we're going to have 2nd will be called Bytów Byway or 2nd Street.
Awesome.
So,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What a wonderful acknowledgement.
That's our sister city in Poland. So, and I thought that should have been our mother city instead of having a sister city. The concept of sister city is something you make. We could make Homer a sister city to anything we wanted,
Yeah.
And instead of that, we've got a connection to Bytów because my grandfather came from there, my great-grandfather on my mother's side came from there. So we kind of were all set to have a connection to Bytów. And that's where I got the idea. I thought we should rename it. And so it's starting to happen. Whether or not we get 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, I don't know.
It'd be nice, though.
Yeah, I thought so. I'll be happy. 2nd was my street. So it'll be nice to call it Bytów Byway. So,
since we're talking about the Kashubian connection, what is the difference between being Kashubian and Polish? Is there a difference?
In reality, nothing. We're all the same people. We're from a northern part of Poland is Kashubian or Pomeranian, and up near the Baltic. Polish is the rest of the country, but we are all Polish. Yeah. The difference is we have a different language for Kashubia, and nobody realizes that until they try to read it or speak to somebody from one of the areas. Yeah. So to illustrate that, I took a group from Winona by bus over to Independence. Independence, Wisconsin, 30 miles from here, is Silesian. Silesian is the southern part of Poland. Farmers, coal miners, business, industry. The language is different enough so that I had the two of the people, my uncle or my auntie Josephine, and a neighbor over here who used to be in the choir. They were going to tell the story about taking the Green Bay Railroad to Independence or coming to Winona. And then they would get here and go fishing and get sunfish, small sunfish, too small to eat. And you had to make fish soup, ryby zupa. You had to clean the fish, of course, first, then cook them, then eat them, and visit with each other, and then get back on the train and go home. I wanted the identical story told by each of them in their own language. And we spent an hour and a half laughing because they didn't know the names. They couldn't figure out the words. They were getting mixed up. What? So, there's different words for potato, different words for fish. And they would just say, there is no such word like that, And then, yes, there is. So that's the difference between Kashubian and Polish.
Wow. When you were a child, you were born here. What are the most important events, things that you remember in your family life that you, kind of stood out as a child?
Now, the thing that first comes to mind is I was serving at St. Stan's for 7 o'clock Mass in the morning in the wintertime, and I came through the alley. Well, the alley between the school, the old school, and the church was a big puddle, froze solid. And I always thought, well, that's a great chance to spin your wheels on a bicycle, Yeah. Except that time I fell down, landed on the back of my head. And apparently I knocked myself out because there was a nun, Sister Edward, in the music room looking at the puddle. Sees me fall down 3 times. I told her I fell once.
Wow.
So apparently I was unconscious for 2 of them.
Yeah.
I'd get up and try getting into the church to serve. And I started feeling a little woozy, and she came over and said, yeah, go on home. So she called my mother and said, keep an eye on him, call the doctor, you know. So that was my lasting impression of St. Stan's School, sliding in the alley. But there were other main things, not like that, but Sister Edward taught us music, so I was in the band. And luckily, they were throwing all these old uniforms out, because this is now be 60-some years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And the first uniform I went through, I looked in the pocket, it's got my name in it. I said, well, this is still fit. The sleeves came about to here, and the jacket was way up here someplace. I couldn't get it on anyway. At Christmas time, she would have a choir, a boys' choir, with about 60 kids in it. And we would line up the entire front of the church, 3 rows, and sing Polish songs. The nice part about my memory is I'm lousy with names, as you and I both share. But I can sing Polish songs without end. I have no idea what I'm singing, but they're all memorized. So I can do Lulajże, Dzisiaj Betlehem, Stille Nacht, the whole list, go through them. And so when I was in Poland the last time, I complained. I said, I didn't get any Christmas carols from you guys this year. I went to church, and the closing song was In the Shoes of a Fisherman, because it's in Spanish and in Polish, but you guys sang it in Spanish. I was looking for Polish Christmas carols in a Polish church in Poland, and you didn't have any. And they looked at me and said, well, let's sing some right now. You lead, told me, like they figured they'd stump me.
Yeah.
I said, how many do you want? So we sang Christmas carols for about a half hour in Poland, not knowing what I'm singing. But see, I could memorize all that, and that stays there forever. So, yeah. And we'd be dressed like little angel kids, you know, black cassock on and a white surplice, and standing there with their hands folded. And we did a good job. So those were memorable things. First communion, they'd have the faucets tied up so we couldn't drink water, and wreck your chances of making your first communion, you know. So, but oh yeah, the school. I remember all the sisters. Sister Victoria in kindergarten, 60 kids twice a day, by herself. And they now, you know, you get more than 25 kids, they have to get a helper, and they have to get another teacher and another teacher. So Sister Blanche in 8th grade, she cracked me one day, and I said, what was that for? She said, you know what that's for. Now, to this day, I don't know what she hit me for. So I think that was the kid in the desk next to me.
It was his fault?
Yeah, it was doing something either with his shoe on his desk, or, you know, something where it would make a lot of noise. But it wasn't me. But I stayed friends with Blanche for another 30 years, because I'd visit her at the old folks' home of the nuns in Mankato, you know.
How old were you when you made your first communion?
7.
7.
So I'd have been
Yeah.
1944. So I went grade school St. Stan's, high school to Cotter, college St. Mary's, and then transferred to St. Paul. At St. Paul, I got graduate school for 4 more years. So, yeah.
Well, when, where, and from what family were you born? You're talking about this street being renamed. Is that the area you were born?
Yeah. Okay. We used to have a train running through here.
Yeah.
The Green Bay Railroad ran up and down 2nd Street, and it was enjoyable as a kid, because once in a while, people would park on the north side, or what we'd call the river side of the track, and a little boulevard, but it often wasn't wide enough to get a train through. Well, you can't pull out on the shoulder, you know, to go around the car. So the train would have to stop, beep the horn, wait till somebody came out of the house, move the car, and then proceed up here to Bay State, Peerless Chain. All the industry was up here on Front and Second Street. So they were. It was an interesting place to live because my uncle lived on Laird Street. My folks lived on Second and Vine. My grandmother lived on Second and the block below Vine Street, whatever that is. Bad memory. And if you went from there to all the way to the end where the knitting mills is, that was my grandmother on my mother's side. Wow. Her mother lived there, and her husband and family. And my uncle lived a block above that. It'd be her older brother. And all the way up and down Second Street was all these relatives. So, yeah, we had.
And you were born in this community? Here,
right, yeah.
Into this
yeah.
wonderful relatives.
That's why I had kind of a fellowship with all these Polish people, because there was no acknowledgement that there was anything to do with Poland. The Historical Society didn't seem to be that much interested, but then it dawned on me later they couldn't speak Polish. So how could they know anything about it? And but the book Who's Who in Winona in 1900, there's not a Polish person in it.
Really? Wow.
No. And if you would have looked at any of their library and books for sale in their store, Famous Homes in Winona, there's not a Polish name in there in the book. So, well, Polish people lived here. Why wouldn't they be in the book? So all my life I was interested in being Polish, and I would fight with the guys who claimed they were Irish, when we were in the seminary. Not fight, but to tease fight, insult each other to death. So we would do that, and it was just an acknowledgement that we were Polish, but the city didn't seem to acknowledge the same thing. So in the courthouse, when they uncovered the courthouse and the cornerstone where the post office used to be, on Main Street and 4th, there was a cornerstone in there. And of course, there were names in the cornerstone of the masons who built the building. And there were a lot of common laborers who worked on that building. It included Polish people. Nobody. So I said, how come we don't get any acknowledgement? And so it started to bother me a little bit, and that went on for years because there's nothing I could do about it. Yeah. I didn't think I could. So after I was ordained and moved to 4 different cities, finally I thought, maybe, we're going to lose all this history in my generation. I'm already the 3rd generation. Yeah. And if nothing's done with that, if nothing's recorded, if there's nothing handed on, it'll be gone another generation or 2. So I thought, maybe we should do something. And then I mentioned that to my sister, and I was working at St. Mary's College at the time as a chaplain, and I mentioned it to 2 guys in the food service, Larry Gilhooly and Jerry Sauer. And we were doing it after lunch, after the students' lunches. We'd meet in the faculty dining room, and we would shoot the breeze about anything. And one day I said, St. Mary's College always has big dinners to honor their sponsors and their big donors. I said, why don't you ever honor your little donors, or people who give part of their life to you and not their riches? They don't have any. So I said, the people who work here on your staff are 90% Polish. Why don't we acknowledge them with a dinner someday? It wouldn't bring in a lot of money, but it'd be good recognition.
Would be a nice
yeah, so they loved the idea. And then I mentioned it to 2 people, and they all laughed, including the priest when we said we'd like to start the day with a mass at St. Stan's, then go out to the college to eat. And these two guys in food service said, we'll take care of the whole dinner. We'll cook for you, line everything up. You'll have the place to yourself if you do it in the summertime when the kids are gone. So we planned on that. Went to see the priest over there, and he, the same thing, he laughed. Said, you're not going to sell 20 tickets. Who's going to come to that? Well, let's find out. So we did. We decided to get 300 tickets, being very overly optimistic, because the dining room held 300 people.
Yeah. Wow.
The tickets were gone inside of 2 days.
So there's a deep, a need and a longing
Yeah.
that nobody ever paid attention to.
Yeah. And so we didn't even have room for the choir. We didn't have room for the main speaker because we sold all the tickets. Before we could call the excess off the market, they were gone. So anyway, that started us. The second year we did the dinner. The dinner was sold out in 15 minutes.
And that's really, that was the beginnings of this.
That was the beginning. Then we needed a place. We had to have a little exhibit. Where do you keep the exhibit? Well, we garnished a room in St. Stan's, but they said they wanted that back. So eventually I was sent out to look for a place and found the building you're sitting in right here. And it was at that time the Winona Printing Company, but it had started as the Laird Norton Home Office building. So big, thick walls and a humongous building. And I looked at it and said, oh man, by myself I couldn't take care of one room in here. But we got started, and the same thing that happened with the city of Winona happened with our own group. We had a meeting, and I said I was sent out to look for a building. I found one, and they said at the meeting, get out of here. We don't want you in your building. That's your building. I said, wait a while. You sent me to go get the thing. Now it's mine? And they said, yes, that's yours. You bought it, didn't you? And I said, well, I had to. There was nothing there. So I made the deposit out of my own savings. And then I thought maybe we could get the thing done. I wasn't positive, but I thought we could. But the price was a deterrent. They wanted $90,000 for it. And I said, we don't have $90,000. So I wrote a letter to Bill Lang, who owned the building at the time. And I said, it's a nice building. We could use it. It's the right size. But I'm a Catholic priest. I don't have an awful lot of money. I was making $50 a month. And to get $90,000 was a slow process. So anyway, I wrote back to him, said I couldn't do it. I said I couldn't even afford to pay half of what you're asking. He wrote back 1 day later saying, we'll accept your offer. So here I get the thing, if he wanted, for $45,000.
It's yours.
Yeah. And I said, well, that's less than I'd pay for a house in Winona. And I get twice the house, 3 times the house. I mean, there's 3 floors. So anyway, that was the beginning, except I had no workers. They all belonged to the little club we started called Polish Heritage. And so my Uncle Marion, who lived right before the knitting mills, and my dad, who was already in his 90s, came in here to help me move the very room that we're sitting in. It wrapped around this fireplace, and they had to tear all the siding out, and it was just made out of cardboard and, and 2x4s to keep the inside warm.
Basically, your family started. Once you got the museum, they were here and they started the initial process of making this into a museum.
They had 3 fires in the building, so it was pretty dirty in the ceiling, from putting the fire out. And so I spent my first vacation, 3 weeks, on a 12-foot ladder taking the ceiling out, horsehair plaster, and hauling it to my orchard to fill a ditch, a ravine, and which it did. So I think I hauled 30 tons of plaster on this floor and second floor. Yeah. And every night I'd go home and blow my nose full of soot, in my ears full of soot, in my hair would clog up the bathtub. And so it was a slow process. And I didn't have enough money, but I was very fortunate. I had pushed the bank president out of a ditch once up here at Merchants Bank, and he saw me coming in, and he told his fellow officers and my lawyer and their lawyer, give him all the money he wants. So
Wow.
I got the money.
And so you began to put this place together, and then what were the first exhibits you gathered? How did you go about getting exhibits, and of course all of the variety of stuff here?
I didn't go out to get them at all. They just came in. I knew there was something missing, and all they needed was a place. And so the first thing we had to fix was the floor, because there were holes in the floor, and take up the center of the building because it had sagged 3 inches. And so as we were doing that, people would come in with boxes and set them here on the other side of the fireplace in the hall. And I had no place to go with them. A lot of books, wedding dresses, costumes, dishes, furniture, anything that said made in Poland. So we'd have to find a place, so we started hanging it on the wall. So I think the first thing we did was the floor and then the walls. And the walls are made out of mincingware. One mincingware closed. They had all this stretchy double knit material.
Oh, wow.
It wraps around. Yeah. The width of the mincingware is the same width as a sheet of plywood. So we'd wrap it around and nail it to the wall. And so you can screw things in, hammer things in. And we started that way and then got the floor done. So it's all backwards because the ceiling went in last. So everything we dropped would land up on the floor. So there's different places. If you look closely, there's little dents and saw marks. You dropped it off scaffolding on the floor. And then slowly we bought an exhibit space, and opened the thing up so we could show off what little bit came in that makes sense out of it. So
Where did it open? I mean, when people really started visiting? What were you?
Well, my sister put a sign up the week after we bought it, open. And she came in 2 days later, and she says, what happened? I said, well, I tore the wall out. I said, couldn't have all these little rooms, and it's going to be a museum. Well, I already cleaned this place. It was open for the public. No, it wasn't. So we had a little meeting of the minds at that point. So she gets this, decided to hold off till we could decide where we were going with the walls, what would be there.
What year was that?
73, 4, and 5.
73, 4, and 5.
Yeah, I was at the college in 73, and so in 2 years, it got cleaned enough so you could let people come in. And we never locked the doors. Just left the door open during the day. People would wander in. What are you doing? Can I bring in something? Sure. So we had boxes all over the building. And some of it was pretty rough and worn, but some of it was really nice. Things that people preserved, a sick call set or something a candle from the old country that was for your baptism. It's a big, thick beeswax candle. It's about that tall, about this big around, and you light that whenever there's bad weather or troubles of some sort, and you just have that reminder that your God is with you all the time. So anyway, a lot of things like that came in. And looking right behind you, those are all pieces of wood from the sawmills. The Laird Norton sawmill was right down here at the river, a block and a half away. Matter of fact, it was closer than that, because if you went across the street, you walked at the level of the boxcars. You didn't walk on the ground over here. You walked right at the level of the boxcars all the way down to the river. And that's where they were sawing wood, and there was a planing mill across the street, and that's where 6,000 people came from Poland. 2,000 of them wanted to find jobs, and that's where 2,000 of them found work. Here, Empire, and Winona, 3 sawmills. And in my mind, they had to be the builders of Winona, because they were sawing 6 million board feet a day, and it was a lot of lumber. So
Do people still? Do you still get a lot of artifacts and things that people bring in?
Last week it was 2 boxes cake.
So it just continues on and on
Yeah,
and on.
except where do you put it?
Yeah.
You know, you got an exhibit up, so I can't add to that. It's full.
Yeah.
You hang it on. Now there's no room on the wall. The walls are all covered. So we're kind of stretching for.
You need a bigger space, right?
Yeah. And we thought this was way, way, way too big. I had a joke with my sister during that time. Watkins went belly up. I don't know if you remember that. And the whole thing was for sale over there. So I told my sister, I'm going to go buy that building. I need the room. And she said, oh, get out of here. You can't even handle this building. You know, how are you going to pay for everything? And how are you going to fix that up? And
You know, you started with the family and doing this with the family, and as time went on, how's the organizational structure changed? Is it still, are you the president of a board, and is it organized so that, you know, so it continues on?
Yeah, a little bit like that. I'm president of a corporate board.
Yeah.
So if we're sued for anything, somebody falls down. That's a matter of fact, that's why they had me buy it from the Heritage Society. Said if the society buys it and somebody falls down, which they inevitably will, they're going to sue you. But this way, if you have it in your name, they can sue you, not the whole board. So I said, oh, okay. I didn't have anything to lose at the time. So sure, I signed my name, but then that became a legal entity. And then I have these 5 people all around the state and out of state that became board members. They're corporate board members. And then there's a museum board that runs the place. They own it. I turned it over to them already 10, 15 years ago. So they have it and plan all the activities and help set things up. And so it's an ongoing process.
Oh, I bet it is.
So, yeah.
So does the museum have a relationship with the city? You know, in any way, the University of Winona, or it's part of their structure? Are you completely separate from all those?
Well, you would think we're separate as far as help, but now we do get a donation every year from them. I think it's $1,000. So,
Not too much then.
Not a lot, no, not for a building this size. But at the same time, it's not peanuts either, so we can use it. And with Winona State, we probably have a better relationship. I'm friends with Scott Olson, or I think I am. Anyway, he sends me a Christmas card, so I know we're not close, you know, but close enough to recognize each other and laugh with each other. So I get invited to his home once in a while. So, matter of fact, Scott Olson's been to Poland, if I'm not mistaken, 14 or 15 times.
Wow.
Yeah. He did some work there previous to being a school president. So, loves the place, yeah.
With the museum, do you have other dreams that you'd like, things that you'd like to see happen as the museum moves forward?
Sure. I would like a big building in the middle between the annex and here. I don't even know if you know, we have 3 buildings right now. Do you?
No, I did not know.
Okay.
Some others may know.
Yeah. There's, right next door is a little house. That was the Schultz house. Well, I was friends to the 2 bachelor boys who lived there and kind of took care of them before they died. And then the house, the building next to that, kind of got abandoned. That was the biggest drug raid in Winona, was in that house. But it was a very inefficient house because you could walk down in the basement and look where the foundation met the house itself on that first floor, and you could see out from there across the street. So not a real good wind protection. And but at the same time, it belonged to a doctor, but he was a herbologist. That's how he self-titled himself. And he had a son who drowned here in the river, and there are little openings and little doors and windows for dressing rooms and procedure rooms. So anyway, we bought that house, but it had to come down. The water froze in it first year. So we took that down and then built this big annex that's there. Yeah. So that's supposed to be capable of holding 300 people. Oh, wow. Okay. And we do use it for any kind of meeting that we have, like Polish things, egg decorating, paper cutting, those kinds of things. But then for dinners, and once in a while people even rent the place, if they want. Lutheran Social Service? No, there's an insurance company.
Yeah.
Lutheran Brotherhood?
Yeah, it was originally the Lutheran Brotherhood, and they've renamed that. But
yeah. And a Bittner is the one who's in charge. So, yeah, he came down and rented the place. But there's all kinds of. We had a funeral in there once for a guy who wanted to be cremated and buried at sea, meaning the Mississippi. And which I'm not allowed to do, but they wanted to do it. I think, yeah, go ahead. We got to help the sick and the dying, and the works of mercy. So they had it, and then they went all across in a procession, across to the old bridge. Yeah. Stopped in the middle of the bridge. By that time, a cop had followed us. Want to know what you guys are doing here? All these headlights on the old bridge. Yeah. And I said, I think they're burying their uncle. So, anyway, that's kind of what happened. They stopped over the edge and all laughed and sang a song and got back in the cars and came back here to eat lunch. Wow. But I think that's the only funeral we had. Maybe we had two. No weddings or anything like that. So, but there's a couple of receptions we had for people after a funeral at the church. They'd come here for lunch. That works out good. But the main thing would be if we took that middle area and tried to connect the two big buildings. And I need a couple floors just to keep books in. Some of the exhibits that are boxed up, we have, I suppose, 25 wedding dresses. They're not huge, but they take up space. Oh, sure. And they need to be protected from the sunlight. You need to have climate control, and you can't do that with the old buildings. So we're looking for that, hoping that could happen someday. And middle could be an entry to both sides. Where you're sitting, this level is above flood stage in Winona. If there wasn't a dike. There is a dike, but the dikes seep underneath. Yeah. So every time we get above 13 feet flood stage, it won't leak until it gets there. At 13.1 or 2, it won't leak then either until the water starts to go down. Then it seeps underneath. And we'll get water in the basement here, next door, and yeah. So at this level we don't, but the basement does. If you look out, you can see almost, how high we are next to the river. So anyway, that would be one thing we could do. I even have visions in my head of what it would look like, where the glass would go, and exhibits we'd have out in the windows. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful dream.
Yeah. A lot of stuff like that. But most of them, sick calls and helping people with problems and troubles. And I remember taking a .38 revolver away from a cop because he wasn't sure what she was going to do with the gun, so I had to take it home with me. So I said, oh yeah, that would do the job all right.
Wow.
Oh yeah, and all kinds of stuff like that. But besides that, I shouldn't tell you this. I'm probably the best preacher we had in Winona Diocese. Except I don't tell that to anybody. That's why I had to think about telling it to you.
Wow. Anything else that you would like to share?
Not a thing.
Huh? Not a thing.